on, there is also a committee that the government has set up to analyze whether the financial year for the country should be changed to January to December. Do you have an update on that? Is there a sense that you can give to us whether the change in financial year will come into effect from next year or not?
You see, the next budget will not be impacted by the report of the Sankaracharya committee on change of financial year, because the committee will give the report. They have been given a time frame of 6 months. So as soon as the report is, by the time we receive the report and examine it, next year's budget would have been already presented. So once the report comes, and depending on what recommendation they have given, and depending of course on what decision finally the government takes, it will only impact the budget of 2018-19.
How will the budget process get impacted due to the GST rollout?
You see, we are this year planning to introduce the budget about 4 weeks ahead of the normal date.
So will it be on the 1st or the 2nd?
It should be around that date. I mean, that is something on the exact date government has not yet decided. So, but broadly it will be about 4 weeks ahead of the normal date of budget presentation. So we are therefore looking at end January or early February, a window of about 4 or 5 days. I mean, that is how it stands today, but it is again subject to government taking a final decision.
The Election Commission has given a go-ahead?
That is under discussion. That is under discussion with the Election Commission, and the government will decide shortly about the date. Now, the attempt is to pass the main appropriation bill and the finance bill before 1st of April. GST also will require the taxation legislation, the legislation for central GST, the legislation for IGST, which are required to be passed by the parliament. The bills are already, the draft bills are already, they are in the public domain. Comments are, being received, and the bills will be finalized, and we hope that the government would be able to enact these bills even in the winter session of the parliament. So therefore, 1st April is going to be very crucial, because by that time the GST legislations, the tax legislations would have been enacted, the finance bill also would have been passed, and the appropriation bill would have been passed. And that will create the background, that will create a kind of situation whereby GST is actually implemented from 1st of April.
Well, what about developing a consensus on the issue of rate? Do you think that is also likely to happen before the next budget?
You see, the states are very much on board. In fact, I would say that there is a lot of enthusiasm among the states, because please remember that as soon as the Constitution amendment was passed, we require 50% of the state legislatures to...
The center is still emphasizing on an 18 to 19% rate, but there are some states who do not favor this.
No, I am coming to the tax rate. So the mere fact that in 22 days, more than half the state legislatures had passed, had ratified the Constitution amendment, it shows the kind of commitment every state has towards GST. Now, with regard to rate, the matter is already under discussion in the GST Council, and parallelly at the officers level the matter is under discussion. I think the areas of differences are being narrowed down. I will not be able to share the details of those discussions which are taking place. It's not appropriate for me to share the details of those discussions. But the discussions are proceeding very well, very positively. And the areas of differences of opinion have been considerably narrowed down. I would expect, commonality of views emerging in the next few weeks with regard to the rate of taxation.
Well, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about the agenda of your trip. You're here to attend the annual IMF World Bank meetings. What are the key points that India has put forth?
See, we have been having two sets of meetings. One stream of meetings is with the private sector investors, and the other stream of meetings is with the World Bank and IMF. So far as World Bank is concerned, the discussions centered around how to increase the lending portfolio of the World Bank. Currently, the World Bank loan portfolio, that is the commitment they make in a year, is about $27 billion US. And we have stressed that it is necessary to step it up to about $40 billion US if the structural, if the SDG 2030 goals will have to be achieved. In IMF meetings also, similarly, the global economic situation was reviewed. The IMF has given a projection of about 3.1% growth for the world economy this year. And what is coming out and what is quite important to note is that today 3/4 of the global growth comes from the developing and emerging market economies, and the rest is coming from the developed world. So therefore, in the developing and emerging market economies, it is again led by India and China and a few other countries in Asia. So these countries are doing a lot of structural reforms, and we need to continue with that. With regard to the meetings with the private sector investors and the companies, before coming to Washington, we were in Canada, and we had interaction there with various pension funds, superannuation funds, CEOs of various leading companies. So we found that the mood was very buoyant and very positive so far as India is concerned. In fact, one of them went to the extent of saying that when we asked him whether he had any difficulties or any issues, he said he has had no difficulty in India, either with the government or with any other kind of regulatory clearances which he required, and it was very smooth. So the mood was very positive. They are looking at India as an investment destination, and they are also looking at the possibility of setting up stressed asset funds along with the banks in India to deal with some of the stressed assets and non-performing assets which are held by the banks and which are probably going to be put in the ARC route. And here in the United States, we have again been interacting with various investors. Broadly, the mood is very positive so far as India is concerned, and there is a lot of interest to invest in India. All these interest, and many of them incidentally are already investing in India. So we would expect a greater flow of investment into India.
Well, Mr. Das, from what I hear from you, it seems that investors are moving away from being cautiously optimistic about India to being optimistic about the country. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.